Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is now June 27th, a little after 2 p.m. And I'm your co-host, John Lee, joined by our stupendous and amazing Jeongmin Kim. And we have, again, as always, quite a lot of things to discuss.
Right. Well, let's take off with some updates on domestic politics. We haven't touched on too many stuff going on there for a while.
Well, that's because nothing has been going on for a while.
Right, but now it's sort of all happening at the same time. Let's start with the Democratic Party finally sort of winning the tug-of-war on who leads the permanent committees at the National Assembly.
Right, so there are 18 committees in the National Assembly.
The permanent ones.
The permanent ones. 18 permanent National Assembly committees. But what happened was that eventually the Democratic Party decided to take over 11 of those committees and give the 7 of them to the PPP. Now, this should be not all that controversial. The big party gets more committees, but the issue that the ruling party took was that the DP, the Democratic Party, took over 2 seriously powerful committees, and they were the Legislative Committee and the Steering Committee.
And why are they particularly powerful?
Well, the Steering Committee is a bit more direct because the Steering Committee is the one that oversees the presidential office. How much money is being spent, what exactly kind of projects are they going through, what exactly is the president proposing. That's what that committee will be overseeing.
And they will be, are they the ones that pass stuff like special budget for the presidential office and stuff?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And moving the presidential office, for example.
And that's going to be one of those things that they're going to talk about. The decision that Yoon made to move the presidential office in the Blue House to Yongsan has been a sticking point. So, they've been talking about shamans and they wanted to investigate it. And now they got control of the steering committee. That gives them an opportunity to do so. But much more immediately, the thing that the ruling party really hated was that they also took over the legal committee. Now, sure, the legal committee can be used directly to, say, have investigations into the First Lady, relitigate the Marine's death from July last year.
Because they handle the special prosecutorial investigation stuff, right?
Right, but, beyond that, it's also the fact that any time any law has to go to the floor for a plenary vote, before it can do that, it needs to go through the Legislative Committee.
Like, let's say the PPP wants to get rid of real estate-related taxes. Will they have to go through the Judiciary Committee?
Yes, ma'am, and if they do, good luck to them, because they will never get it passed. And so this has really annoyed the ruling party, and that's because it's been customary for the second largest party to be able to run the Legislative Committee. But that was never set in stone, of course.
It was more like just a norm.
A gentleman's agreement, so to speak. But now...
Quite literally.
Quite literally, exactly, because, no women. But now that custom has been broken, the PPP had boycotted the parliament for about 28 days?
Yeah, almost a month.
Almost a month. But after a month, the ruling party finally relented and said, fine, we'll take over these 7 committees that you've given us, and you can take over those 11.
And the 7 committees, it's not like they're nothing. And it includes stuff like the Defense Ministry and the Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Defense, finance, foreign affairs, those big picture items. And so, yes, they did get those items, but the PPP is saying, but this is what the Democratic Party is doing. They're trying to look magnanimous by giving them these big-sounding committees, but they all have to go through the Legislative Committee later.
Right, and also stuff like Defense Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee sound big. Actually, they can't really do anything much there that criticizes the government, because it's basically just reviewing the policies that they're already implementing.
And they're really all the president's purview. So the PPP has been defanged and detoothed. Or should I say defanged and declawed? But yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and when it comes to the chairman sort of deal regarding these committees, this also goes the same, like 7 and 11.
I believe so, yes.
All right, then let's move on to what's happening within the Democratic Party. We also haven't really discussed this so far that much, but it's in action now because DP is finally really preparing for the party leadership primary.
They are really scrubbing out anything that Moon Jae-in tried to do for the DP. We have to remember that when Moon Jae-in became the DP leader back in the day, before he became president, this was right when all of these corruption charges were building up against Park Geun-hye.
Because it was also the core legitimation of that administration.
Right. When Moon was in
Anti-corruption.
charge, they were saying the DP is the anti-corruption party. It is the morally and ethically preferable party. And so they had all of these different caveats in their articles, in their charters, about how there's going to be about anti-corruption, about if you're convicted to prison, then you'll be stripped of your parliamentary committee rights and everything. But after all of that was put into place, now they just kind of just got rid of all of that.
Why?
Well, Lee Jae-myung. The man is in a lot of legal troubles.
And they want him to be elected as a leader again.
Yeah, the man is gonna stay at the helm until the very bitter end, until, he decides to let it go because the next step up is to become president.
Okay, well, then that's quite sly as an understatement. But let's move on to the PPP. We haven't discussed PPP either for a while because there was nothing going on there aside from the tug-of-war against DP. But it seems like in the past week or so, we are finally seeing the confirmed frontrunners, the list of frontrunners for their party leadership as well. And apparently, Han Dong-un is back.
Yeah, Han Dong-un wants the top job again, and he's got his fair share of critics. For example, Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo has been calling him a kid this entire time. The kid who ruined...
The kid who was obsessed with selfies.
The kid obsessed with selfies, and the kid who ruined the elections, who wants to come back to lead the party again.
Which is a fair point, honestly. But from the critics' point of view against Han. But there are also like 3 or so people who wants the job.
Sure, there's former Land Minister Won Yi-ryong, who also wants the job as well. And then there's also now 3-time PPP leadership nominee, wannabe, Na Kyung-won.
Who
failed multiple times before. But, she's probably not going to do it well again this time around, but we'll have to see.
But Na Kyung-won made headlines on June 25th, the Korean War.
All 3 of them did.
Right, anniversary. But Na Kyung-won kicked it off by posting a very short message on Facebook saying, South Korea needs nuclear weapons.
South Korea needs nuclear weapons, she said. And after she said that, Han Dong-un said that South Korea needs to develop the capabilities to acquire nuclear weapons.
Although caveated a little bit about the like gradual blah, blah, blah.
And Won Yi-ryong said the same thing, that he also thinks that South Korea should have nuclear weapons. And so did Daegu Mayor Hong Jun-pyo, who is not in the running to become leader. But yeah.
This is his soft spot, nuclear weapons for South Korea.
And on June 25th, on the 74th anniversary at the start of the Korean War, 4 prominent South Korean politicians all said that we need nuclear weapons.
Not to mention that it's quite a day to say something like that. Also, it's kind of out of nowhere because...
Well, it's not out of nowhere. The Russians and the North Koreans have
that's exactly my point because it seems the expert views in the past year, it seems, was that it has something to do with the U.S. assurance issue, right? But then all other experts also pointed to how assurance is a dilemma, and there's an irony to that because it doesn't matter how much U.S. gives South Korea as a security assurance, South Koreans will want nuclear weapons when they want it.
And we also have to remember it's not just about Putin and Kim Jong-un having their buddy-buddy moment. It's also about what's going on in the U.S. Yeah, since last year, Biden and Yoon have been hammering the point about the nuclear consultative group. We've had U.S. nuclear assets, even nuclear submarines show up when they're not supposed to show up.
Also, there is a U.S. aircraft carrier right now near the Korean Peninsula for drills.
The USS Theodore Roosevelt. But the problem is, what happens in November? If Donald Trump comes into office, what happens to the NCG? And we have to remember that among those people who we think might be in the second Trump administration is a man named Elbridge Colby, who has said that the U.S. needs to be far more focused on defending itself against China, and that's all options on the table for South Korean defense, including nuclear armament. And so with all of these different kinds of talks going on, whether it's realistic or not, these South Korean conservatives have been now saying maybe this is the time to talk about it.
Right, but also grain of salt for our listeners is that we heard from multiple sources that Colby might actually not be really anywhere close to getting that job.
He might not, but he's the person who's in the headlines, at least in South Korean media.
Right, so that's where the perception comes from, is what you mean.
Yeah.
From the conservative point of view, okay. And there's one last person who might want this party leadership job in the PPP. Who is it?
His name is Yoon Sang-hyun. Now, when all of these four people were talking about nuclear weapons, so was he, but in a slightly different way. He was saying that talking about an independent acquisition of nuclear weapons is irresponsible, and that right now is a time to actually strengthen our alliance and strengthen extended deterrence with the U.S.
But he sounds less crazy, so he wasn't in the headlines, right?
And that's why he won't win.
That's something very unfortunate with South Korean politics.
All right, moving on, we do need to talk about something a bit more tragic. Now, this has been in the headlines, but there has been a fire at a lithium battery factory. And now, as it turns out, dozens of people died.
It was a major accident.
Most of them foreign workers from China, and at least 5 South Korean workers have died as well. Now, Jeongmin, you've been monitoring this. Could you explain to us exactly what happened? Why did this fire happen? What are the implications?
Right. According to the firefighting authorities, throughout the week, this was Monday, and it's I believe was in Hwasong City in Gyeonggi Province. It was from this facility owned by Arisol, which is a lithium battery production company in South Korea, which has been sort of a hot industry in South Korea, especially after all the EV sort of popularity and more government sponsorship for companies that basically support whatever sounds like clean energy.
It's
right?
one of those future industries. And I did read up a little bit about this, but apparently I saw that some of the batteries started to combust, and this led to a series of secondary explosions and combustions as well.
Right, which is what we often see in other major accidents regarding these lithium factory in other parts of the world as well. But this is usually the main reason.
Once in a while, you'll read about a Tesla that just exploded out of nowhere.
Right, that's what I was going to explain. It was, I believe, last year in September, a Tesla factory in Australia. There was a major fire from similar reasons. And then there was another case in 2021, also the same factory. And it took 3 days for the authorities to get the fire under control. So this happens in other parts of the world, but it seems like South Korean factory, it wasn't really ready with certain guidelines for workers, as in how to
keep them safe.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously with this fire, we can talk about economic costs, and we can also talk about safety issues. But I want to talk about these people who died. Now, as some of our listeners might be aware, South Korea has these safety laws that are in place, industrial safety laws, where they say that if there's some sort of a workplace accident that has taken place due to management's neglect, then this can lead to serious repercussions for not just immediate managers, but for senior managers as well.
Right, and especially in facilities where you can reasonably expect that there are certain risks that the workers have to face.
Right, lithium battery factories being one of them, of
Exactly.
course. But the question that I have for you is the fact that most of these people who died are foreign workers from China. How does this law really impact businesses? Will a South Korean manager, for example, be forced to go to prison if, let's say, for example, in this case, let's say, for the sake of argument, that no South Korean died, but only foreign workers died? What would be the implications, the legal implications that would affect the South Korean managers?
I briefly reviewed the act, and it seems like it wouldn't matter of the nationality of the people who suffered from the accident or casualties.
Got it. Okay.
Because it's more about the responsibility that the CEO basically holds for those who own these facilities and who have the responsibility to review the facilities for the sake of the worker safety. And also, not to mention, because of the recent amendments, this will apply to smaller businesses compared to in the past.
In the past, initially only the large corporations came under this law, but now if you have 50 or more employees, then you will be covered by this law as well. Yeah.
So this accident will likely serve as a case study for the newly amended version of the Serious Accident Punishment Act, as in how these foreign workers will be receiving reparation or their bereaved families, and how much responsibility will actually go to the owner of Aerosol.
Stay ahead in understanding South Korean politics, business and society with a Korea Pro subscription. Gain access to daily email newsletters, expert briefings and exclusive events designed for professionals like you. As a podcast listener, you can now try Korea Pro for free and subscribe at a discounted rate if you like what we're doing. Equip yourself with the insights that matter most. Visit koreapro.org/podcast to subscribe and ensure you never miss a critical update. Korea Pro, never be sidelined again.
Week ahead. I feel like I've mentioned this maybe 100 times on this podcast, but doctor strike. We haven't shared updates about doctor strike for a while. What's new?
Well, what's new is that initially a bunch of the doctors, especially those associated with the Seoul National University and the Samsung Medical Group, they all said that they were going to go on an indefinite strike, and some of them did.
And severance is going to start 27th, right?
Well, that's the
today.
thing. Some of the doctors said that they were going to go on an indefinite strike, but some of them said that they changed their minds. Some of them did go on an indefinite strike for about 5 days, but then returned to work saying they could no longer, in good conscience, continue their strike because the patients are suffering. But Yonsei is saying that they are going to go ahead with their indefinite strike. So apparently there's quite a bit of a lack of coordination among these doctors.
And when you say doctor, does it apply to the professors?
Yeah. So these trainee doctors that we've been talking about for months, they've already been on strike for quite a while.
Technically.
But the ones that we are talking about now are those medical professors.
Which are more of a major risk to the patient.
Yeah, when the trainee doctors quit, when they all walked out, it was the medical professors who stepped up and said that they're going to take care of the patients. But especially in a hospital like Severance, one of the largest hospitals in the country, when the medical professors as well say, we're going to take off as well, things might get a bit dicey, no?
And of course, the Freedom Edge drill, trilateral drill between South Korea, U.S., and Japan, it started today. And when it comes to South Korea's position on whether or not to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine, what's up with that?
Apparently, there's been quite a bit of a public divide. The majority of the South Korean public is opposed to the provision of lethal weapons to Ukraine.
55%, according to NBS poll, uploaded just today.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if that really matters. When it comes to foreign policy, public opinions don't really matter. That's under the purview of the president.
I mean, not always.
Not always. It depends on how unpopular it is, I guess. But we have to also consider that we don't really know if Yoon actually meant it when, the National Security Advisor said that we are going to reconsider sending weapons.
And also, he's been playing this game of being strategically vague about the decision, right?
It depends on what Russia will do.
He said stuff like, Russia will see gradually. It depends on their behavior. It's sort of like the same language that they use to North Korea.
Yeah, that's what Chang Woo-jin said. But there's also the fact that the statement said, our actions on sending weapons will depend on what Russia will do. And what does that mean? Does it mean that Russia has to provide specific weapons or any weapons? Does it mean that it has to provide some kind of a nuclear power plant? We don't know what it means. They just kept it very vague. So this could be a whole nothing burger, as usual.
They're doing a very delicate dance sort of thing for days now. This will potentially go on for weeks and weeks or even months.
I wouldn't call it a delicate dance. I'd just call it all hot air and nothing else. And you heard it here first, folks.
And speaking of Russia, which also did a summit recently with Vietnam, right after the North Korea summit, the Vietnamese prime minister is also, maybe coincidentally, maybe not, visiting South Korea on June 30th for almost a week.
Lots of meetings.
Right, and they actually, South Korea and Vietnam actually upgraded their relations to the comprehensive strategic partner relation, which is the same wording as the Russia-North Korea treaty relationship. And it's the highest level visit from Vietnam since then. And apparently there will be business forums as well with very high-level leaders of the South Korean conglomerates, of course, like Jay Lee from Samsung.
It wouldn't be a South Korea-Vietnam summit without a lot of business leaders tagging along. And of course, all this information will be sent to you in your email inbox by Monday at 2 p.m. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lay. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Great Pro Podcast.